So Linia, thanks for talking to me today. It's nice to see you as always.
Pleasure.
What I wanted to talk to you today about really is just your sort of expertise on nutrition, and hopefully you can help out lay individuals like myself to know a little bit more about nutrition and how we can involve it in the team.
Yeah.
So firstly, I asked the last physio I spoke to about his exercise routine, because we're always one for advising other people to exercise. Of course, I'm going to ask you about your diet. So what do you tend to eat?
Well, I've just come back from a trip from Italy, so I've been stuffing myself with pasta and pizza. But I tend to eat healthy 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time I can eat whatever I want. So I indulge, and I think that's a really healthy approach to healthy eating. Because I think if you take it too extreme, then your mind becomes obsessed with the one thing that you've cut yourself from eating. And then if you are too lenient, then obviously you're not going to, maintain good body composition, etc., etc. So definitely moderation. Majority of the time, make healthy choices. I think it's ingrained in me because I'm a dietitian. But that's not to say I don't like eating chocolate cake and tucking into a burger and fries.
Okay, yeah.
My indulgence is triple fried chips.
They're amazing. I can completely understand that. Okay, so what actually got you interested in nutrition in the first place?
Bit of a long-winded story. So always have loved biology and chemistry. So actually got a scholarship to do chemical engineering initially.
Wow.
I know. So I actually did my first year in chemical engineering, and then I realised that engineering probably just wasn't for me, but I loved the chemistry. So I kind of turned that into a BSc in medicinal chemistry. So after the BSc, I kind of got my chemistry fix, but I knew that I wanted to work with people.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, well, how do you bridge this? So I'm still getting my biology and my chemistry, or obviously interacting with people. So then I, did some shadowing. So I went to sort of pharmacist, the usual physiotherapist, speech and language therapist, dietitian, and met doctors as well. And I remember it was 2 days. I spent 2 days. One was at the Sports Science Institute in South Africa with a sports dietitian there, and then also a day at the Red Cross Children's Hospital in Cape Town.
Okay, wow.
And very, very different. So one very clinical, and you're seeing very, serious, illnesses in kids who are, very, very sick. But seeing the role that nutrition has in that aspect, and then all obviously in kind of performance sport. And I remember both those days, literally leaving and just like bouncing back home, because it was just, had such a buzz, because finally that was the connection between using my very kind of passion for science and chemistry, but being able to kind of translate that into helping people. And I've always kind of been foodie, really interested in kind of cooking and that type of stuff. So I guess it was a natural thing that I didn't necessarily think about, but it could just fit well. So then after I did that shadowing, I absolutely decided I was going to do dietetics. So then what I did was another undergrad in nutrition and dietetics. And then since then I've just dabbled in doing masters in sports, nutrition and public health.
It's really cool. So what have you been doing in public health?
So in public health, I work as a public health strategist.
Oh yeah.
So for Islington and Camden. So just looking at food on a kind of a macro level. So looking at how, Department of Health saying we need to reduce the rate of obesity by X%. So if that's what they're saying on a national level, how does that look on a local level?
I see.
And what should we implement? So weight management programs, but how about education in schools? How about gardens? How about supplementation schemes? So just looking at nutrition as a kind of holistic package.
It's good to get sort of upstream and
definitely. And I think
see the results filtered out.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of what I do, is you've got the one-to-one with patients, so you're very grounded and you know what people are struggling with, but then you can take that and scale it up onto a much bigger kind of macro level.
And working with people gives you the insight to know what to focus on a bigger scale sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't have my head in the clouds as a policy maker.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Fantastic. And you're also a TV celebrity, I understand.
Oh, definitely not.
So tell us about what you did on the TV recently.
So I've been doing some media work. I'm a spokesperson for the British Dietetic Association.
I saw that on your website.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of kind of radio and stuff like that. But just recently started doing a little bit more TV. I think it's a really good platform for evidence-based practicing people and clinicians to just get the right messages out there, because there's lots of myths and fads out there. So it's about actually standing up and fighting the fads, and using, you know, science and evidence base to kind of get the right message across. So yeah, I was working with the BBC on a couple of programs. So one was called Food, Truth or Scare.
Yeah.
And then another one was called The Future of Food.
Okay.
Yeah, so just being an expert nutritionist on that.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So in terms of the truth or scare, I mean, fads are something that I think definitely pop up whenever I hear about nutrition, in the same way they pop up in my field in physiotherapy as well. So what are the recent fads that you've seen, sort of people coming in and telling you about, or people trying? I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff I don't know about.
So many.
What are the current trends?
Definitely, so many, and I spend my life, I think, fighting fads. So I'm trying to think, the recent ones, I mean, the one that's always there is if you eat gluten, you're going to blow up.
Okay.
Or the world's going to come to an end. You know, and I think we're self-diagnosing ourselves with food intolerances. And people as a result are excluding major food groups, and in the short term that might be fine, but in the long term it's not, because they're missing out major nutrients which then have a repercussion
I think it's particularly interesting when parents do that and you see the effect on child health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're putting their own dietary perceptions onto their child as well. Yeah, very dangerous. And interestingly, I think in the 1960s, when it was really, you know, big fad to eat low fat.
Okay.
So you had all these, we call them cereal kids, and their parents were feeding them bran flakes and skimmed milk because they thought that was healthy. And actually, you then got a whole generation of children who are stunted because they just weren't getting the nutrients. Because giving a child who's below, you know, the age of 5 too much fibre is not a good thing, because their stomachs are very, very small. And actually, when someone needs to still grow up vertically, they need a lot of energy. So you know, it's bran flakes. Well, I'm not a fan of cereal anyway, but you might perceive bran flakes to be healthier because it's got fibre, but actually that's not very good for a child. So there's small things like that.
So it's good to learn as well. Okay. Yeah, you said about working with children. So is there anything that you recommend parents should be feeding their children at the moment in particular, or things that I think people are doing wrong perhaps? Or?
I think the whole childhood nutrition is so important. I'm really passionate about instilling good dietary habits earlier on, because we know, and the science very clearly shows, that actually habits that children get when they're growing up are habits that they're going to keep when they're much older. So, and it actually goes beyond that. So we now, the big focus in nutrition is maternal health.
Okay.
So we know, for example, vitamin D deficiency is a brilliant example, and I've been working on this as a public health strategist. We know that if a mother is deficient in vitamin D when she's pregnant, that predisposes their child to getting things like multiple sclerosis, diabetes and cardiovascular disease later on, because vitamin D has its finger in 101 pies, but it's got its finger in the gene regulation pie. So actually it switches on and off the right type of genes, which mean that your risk of getting a disease later on are going to be affected, which is phenomenal. So the huge, there's a big public health campaign at the moment to ensure that pregnant mothers particularly make sure that they're supplementing themselves with vitamin D. And actually just last year, Public Health England is, so a bit conservative with messages that they get out, because they're giving messages to a wider audience. And they recently said that everybody in the UK needs to be on a vitamin D supplement from autumn to spring. So when the kind of clocks go back, I never know which way it is, forward back to when they go forward. Yeah. That's
really interesting. That's actually one of the things I was going to ask you about, like mass supplementation with vitamin D. Is there anything else that we should be sort of implementing on that kind of scale, or?
So I wrote a blog about supplementation recently, because I feel like that if I, as a nutritionist, I get asked two questions, majority questions all the time. One is, which supplements should I be taking? And the other one is, what is the best alcohol to drink?
I'll come on to that supplementation in a minute.
Okay, so supplementation. Vitamin D, absolutely, definitely. But remember, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so how you take it is very, very important. So you have to make sure you're getting the right form. So there's two types of vitamin D. There's D2 and D3. D3 is what the body uses. So even if you're crazy, but you can actually buy supplements that are D2, which is just the biggest scam ever, because you still need the sunshine to convert that. So make sure you're on a D3 supplement, and make sure you take it when there's fat in your stomach, so it increases the absorption. So, back to the, for example, skimmed milk on my, in my porridge. If you're having your vitamin D supplement in the morning, when you're making your porridge with skimmed milk, your absorption is going to be much less than if you have it for dinner or after dinner when you've had a chicken stir fry which you made with some oil.
Okay.
Yeah, so vitamin D. The other one probably would be omega-3.
Yeah.
Now, the jury's out with omega-3. So NICE guidance kind of says that if you take omega-3, there's not necessarily a clinical difference if you look at cardiovascular risk and disease, etc., etc. But I know from my clinical practice, when I take bloods of somebody and we look at omega-6 to 3 ratio, so that is basically markers of inflammation, majority of the time people have 10 or sometimes 20, 30 times more pro-inflammatory markers, omega-6 and omega-3.
Wow.
So that's because if you pick up, for lunch, pick up a sandwich, look at the back, guaranteed you will find some sort of vegetable oil in your food. And there's vegetable oil in absolutely everything. Now, vegetable oil is a source of omega-6. So our diets are so much higher in omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory, than omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory, because as a nation, we're not fish fans. So, we don't eat much fish. I think the average intake of fish in the UK is a third of a portion a week. So if we're eating less omega-3 and traditional sources of omega-3, so before, grass-fed meat would have had a source of omega-3. But nowadays, because of farming and the way things have changed, cows are no longer being allowed to kind of roam wild and eat grass. They're kind of being shut in and they're eating corn-fed feed, which means they've got more omega-6.
Wow, yeah.
So, and if you think of diseases, you're a medic yourself. A lot of diseases are due to inflammation. So cardiovascular disease, inflammation of the arteries, irritable bowel, inflammation of the gut. So actually, if we're looking at a lot of diseases, our bodies we're predisposing ourselves to having more inflammatory conditions. And so ultimately, in terms of nutrition, if you upped your omega-3 intake, because we already know we're eating too much omega-6, then that at least reduces your risk of creating an inflammatory environment. Sorry, very long-winded.
No, it's really interesting. It's particularly interesting, like when you look at sort of different groups of people who eat different food sources. Like northern sort of Norwegians eat a lot more fish than us, don't they?
Yeah.
And then there's this issue about, like you mentioned, about multiple sclerosis, and that can be to do with vitamin D and how your latitude that you live on. Yeah. And then there's a difference between the Norwegian and the Swedish. And it's really interesting. It's really
very
interesting. Hard to tease out exactly what causes what.
Yeah.
But those are the two that I should be looking into.
Well, but then again, more is not better. And I haven't taken your bloods, for example, so I can't recommend a high dose omega-3 supplement.
Yeah.
So you've got to play it safe. So I would say with vitamin D, 1,000 international units is a safe dose if you've not had your bloods done. If you've had your bloods done, you can tailor that. And very similarly with omega-3. If you're not kind of eating lots of oily fish, and actually, because of all the seas being contaminated and mercury and all the PCBs and things like that, we shouldn't be eating oily fish 7 times a week. So I would recommend that you take 1 gram of EPA and DHA, which are basically just the names of the fatty acids which are used. So again, it's about, if you pick up an omega-3 supplement, it will say 1,000 milligrams of fish oil. But that doesn't mean that the active ingredients are 1,000 milligrams. So you really need to start, reading your labels. Okay. This is me becoming a nerd, and
it's great. Yeah. And we can talk a bit about supplementation in sort of sport, perhaps in a minute as well. It's quite an interesting topic. But you mentioned about taking bloods and things like that. I think I've done a bit of shadowing with dietitians over the years and seen a little bit about what you guys do. But I thought some people don't know what the consultation actually involves. Yeah. So maybe just tell us a little bit about sort of how it works when you meet patients.
Yeah, so what we do first is when someone books in, we send them a nutrition and health questionnaire. Now it's really, really important that we send them that, and then they send that back to me ideally 24 hours before the actual consultation, or a little bit earlier if they've kind of said that the reason they're coming to see me is quite complex, and I think that we need to have bloods done earlier before they come see me. And then I would review that, and for something simple like weight management, I can eyeball a diet and tell you approximately how many calories, protein, fat, carbohydrates it's got. But for something more complicated, like for example, if I'm interested in someone's calcium intake and kind of magnesium intake and things like that, I couldn't eyeball it, but I do actual nutrition analysis for it. So that's why it's important for me to get it beforehand, so I can run the analysis on it. And sometimes I tend to find, especially for disordered eating clients, that it's quite nice for them to have something visual for me to say, listen,
objective
this is
results.
exactly, this is what you need to be. You need to be eating 2,500 calories, but you're actually only taking in 1,300. This is a deficit. So it's quite nice for them to have that. So when they come in, a consultation is nutrition education. So it's me making little mini nutritionists out there. So it's really important that they understand why they are being asked to eat the food they're being asked to eat. So whilst I give an example plan, that's not the be and end all. It's about them knowing, Linia says I need to have this amount of protein. That amount of protein, if I look at my hand, that's about 25 grams, and I need that at breakfast, lunch and dinner. So they need to be able to walk into Pret a Manger or into M&S or whatever shop they're going into and be able to make the right decisions. So I think for me, the consultation is very much around nutritional coaching.
I see,
so whatever their goals are, we do the dietary analysis, and then we say, right, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you're doing right, these are the changes you need to make, now let's make that practical. So the majority of a consultation is actually me getting out labels, me getting out pictures of different foods and saying, these are the types of foods you need to eat, this is what it looks like on your plate. Let's kind of write that down.
And how much, you said you're into cooking, do you give any particular recipe advice on how they can implement that in practical sense?
Definitely. It just depends on obviously, cooking levels, but absolutely. Recipe advice or links to good recipe books or YouTube videos, etc. But what's interesting, and I always say to myself, and this is what I've got to do one day, is there's not one go-to cookbook that I would say is absolutely perfect and has absolutely everything in. There's probably a selection, take that from this, take that from that, take that from that, and put it together. So maybe there's a real opportunity there to kind of just have a Linia cookbook.
Yeah, maybe there is. You should do.
Yeah, something like that.
So next
my next plan.
So let's talk a bit about overnutrition and undernutrition. So maybe starting with what seems to be more common. So obesity, a bit of a crisis at the moment, particularly interested in childhood obesity. So I think what's particularly interesting is the role of the individual versus the wider society, and as a public health expert, you'll probably have an interest in this yourself. I heard recently that there's a correlation between the number of fast food outlets that you live near and the obesity rates, or something to do with that. How much do you think the individual is responsible for their body weight?
Well, I think what we've got to remember is that obesity is multifactorial. There's not one thing that's going to be the solution for obesity. So I think the individual definitely plays a role. However, the environment plays a role, and I think kind of legislation and policy and all of that plays a role in creating an environment that encourages healthy eating and making a healthy choice. And then that kind of ties into an individual being educated and informed enough to kind of want to make the choice. So I think it's tying in everything. So obviously the big thing at the moment, so last year in August, the childhood obesity strategy was passed, and one of the big things in there was the sugar tax, voluntary still, but in 2020 it might then become law. Now that's at least moving in the right direction, but it's not the be all and end all. So with that obesity tax, we need to do massive amounts of education and making people aware of the choices they're actually going to make. I think what's important is that you realise that when at the moment the NHS is having to make cuts because it's not sustainable at the moment, and one of the things that gets cut very quickly is public health, because with public health it's about education, it's about preventative care, and you don't necessarily see the effects of that until much later on. So it's actually quite an easy place initially to make the cuts, and I think that's sometimes short-sighted, because if we've spent more time on preventing, then actually we wouldn't spend as much time kind of fighting the fires and dealing with the high rates of bariatric surgery that we're now having to kind of have conversations about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm really passionate about, I think, nutrition policy. So making sure that the policies we set now are not just short-sighted. So, for example, with a sugar tax, companies are going to have to reduce the amount of sugar in their foods and drinks by 20%. Again, it's a voluntary, but majority of them are probably going to do that. One's going to get bad press. But what we need to be careful of is that they're not just pumping lots of non-nutritive sweeteners in there, because we're not then changing the taste perception.
Oh, I see.
So yes, calorie-wise, and this is maybe, in terms of research, I'm really interested in looking at this on a macro level. So calorie-wise, yes, you might have less calories in a Coke, but does that mean that you might then still buy your bag of crisps or your donut? Because we're not necessarily changing the fact that there's that drive for sweetness.
So it actually goes deeper than that,
So, if you want to have a Coke, have a Coke.
Yeah.
Have a full fat, full sugar Coke,
I'll
right?
remember that one.
No, but don't have it all the time.
Yeah.
Don't kid yourself that by having a Diet Coke, you're doing, a good thing, because you might then be compensating it for it later on. And actually, the sweeteners in Diet Coke are 4 times sweeter than sugar. So your taste buds are getting used to that sweetness hit that's 4 times sugar than we were actually naturally, born to deal with.
Okay. So
anyway, I could go on and on and on.
It's fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about undernutrition.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we see sort of working in the sports setting is female athletic triad, issues with bone health, and what should we as sports physicians, sports physios be looking out for? How do we spot this, and what do we do about it?
Yeah, definitely becoming more and more of a problem. I remember at university it was kind of this thing that you got taught, but you never really saw that many people who were experiencing. And now, actually, probably after weight management, the next highest number of people I see is people with stress fractures.
Is it?
That are probably as a result of the female athlete triad. So they're basically expending so much energy but not putting the fuel in. And as a consequence, their body kind of says, okay, I get it. You're spending this much time cycling, so I'll expend energy doing that, but I'm going to switch off all the other things. And one of the things that gets switched off is your reproductive system. And then long term, that's the consequences of that are what we see in terms of recurrence of stress fractures, etc., etc. So I think looking at this from a prevention point of view. So if we see people doing marathons and people doing triathlons or endurance stuff, just asking them the question about what their feeling is like, what their energy levels are like, what their recovery levels are like. Because ultimately, if you are fueling and eating the right balance of foods, then you should be bouncing back pretty good. But actually, if you're not, then your body's going to start taking a toll. So I think in terms of referrals, what will be really good in terms of nutrition is people who are doing any sort of event. I think the one question we're going to be asking them is, what's your nutrition like? You're spending all this time training, but are you supporting your training? Are you getting the most out of your training by eating what you need to be eating?
Absolutely.
And then actually, if we get them, earlier on, and we do some sports nutrition with them, so making sure that they're recovering, having stuff during, etc., then, ultimately that might stop us kind of dealing with so many people who've got this female athlete.
So in terms of getting the balance right, in terms of energy in, energy out, how reliable is our appetite? Can we rely on that? Or?
Not very good. And so this is why it becomes a bit tricky, because actually what happens, and this is the same with eating disorders, is your mind then can start also switching that off. You might be hungry, but you can switch it off, that actually I'm not that hungry and I can keep pushing. So I wouldn't go with appetite, but you would start going with things like recovery levels, with energy levels, with immune system, with colds, etc. And obviously further on down the line, if they're having recurrent stress fractures, that's another telltale sign that something might not be going on in terms of energy and energy out and nutrients.
So a few things to look out for there, actually.
There's quite a lot. Yeah, so I think the focus for me is, being a passionate dietitian, obviously, I think every patient needs to come see a dietitian, because nutrition is integral to everything. So is integral to how you adapt when you've had surgery, to how you adapt once you're going through therapy, etc., etc. So, but if we can't get everybody in, then at least maybe we need to be looking at those people who are taking on high volume of trainings and making sure that they're supporting that with good nutrition.
Sounds great. What about mood? How does what we eat affect our mood? Is there a link there?
Indeed, food and mood. It is big. I mean, vitamin D will probably be one that's right up there in terms of mood, but also in terms of carbohydrates and proteins. So, we tend to think that if you're feeling sad and you have some sugar, it picks you up, but that's a short-term kind of fix. So your serotonin levels do go up and you feel good for a bit, but then you slump back down. So carbohydrates help with mood, but it's making sure that you're eating, your whole grain, low glycemic index, etc., which is really important. And then also, there's all these myths about chocolate being good for you. That's potentially might be because of the magnesium in the chocolate. So, I'm all for dark chocolate, but that's stuff that's more than 75%. So people don't tend to like dark chocolate as much because it doesn't have as much sugar. But you know, chocolate is linked to mood, dark chocolate has lots of antioxidants. So if you find that a piece of chocolate picks you up, then go for it, but go for the dark.
Okay. What about alcohol? You said it's a common question people ask you, so how do you respond to that?
Ooh, and it's interesting. So the first thing I'd say would be there's no one drink that's better than the other. Drink the drink you want. So if you like to have beer, have beer. If you're a red wine person, have red wine. So red wine is not necessarily good for you, or better for you because it's good for your heart, because there's lots of PR kind of linked in with that. But if you like a vodka soda, then have vodka soda. If you like gin and tonic, have gin and tonic. The key is how much you're having and when you're having it. So I think, was it last year that they changed the guidelines? 14, limited at 14, because we're seeing more and more that actually the correlation between alcohol and cancer is stronger than we thought. Okay.
Stomach cancers or general cancers?
Stomach cancers and breast cancers,
right, yeah.
Which is the interesting thing. But again, it's complicated because if we look at the cardiovascular disease at the moment is the biggest killer for people, say, above 40. Yeah. So actually, there might be slight benefits of having one drink of alcohol. So again, it's not linked to red wine or vodka or anything like that, so it's just alcohol. So it's a unit of alcohol. That might have a positive correlation with heart disease when you're older. But I suppose in between, it's kind of like, well, if you keep within the guidelines, then you're absolutely fine. So that's basically your 14 units, and that you have a couple dry days during the week, then you'll be fine. And again, it's, we have a binge drinking culture.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's just not good. So it's not good to kind of have all your units on Friday. So it is about kind of the spreading out and allowing yourself to have some dry days.
Okay, sounds not something I need to look at maybe.
We all do.
So going back to sport, I recently spoke to David Hughes over in the Australian Institute for Sport, and we talked about supplements a little bit.
Yeah.
And he was saying that really all supplements should be third-party batch tested and all this other stuff about contaminants in supplements. Do you think they're actually a good thing in general for athletes to be looking at?
Definitely a place for supplements, but I tend to look at the supplements like a kind of staircase.
I see.
So there's no point taking a supplement on your way to McDonald's and thinking that that's going to be your magic bullet. So you have to get the fundamentals of nutrition right first. So, eat regularly, number one, don't skip meals, and then make sure you're getting a balance of the good foods on your plate. Then you might start looking at organic, non-organic, quality. Then kind of supplements come on top of that. And the key supplements is in the word. It's a supplement, so it's actually just adding to your diet versus replacing anything in your diet. So definitely a place for supplements. However, it's important that you're taking the right one at the right time and you're not just taking it because you think it's a shortcut. In terms of sports, we tend to categorize supplements, and the Australian Institute of Sport have a really good way of categorizing supplements, and they do it as an A, B, C, D. So A is where there's lots of kind of randomized controlled trials, and there's a strong correlation between taking that supplement and performance. Okay, so that's the stuff that all the Olympic athletes would be dabbling with. And then there's B, where growing body of research that shows that there might be a link, however we haven't quite linked it to performance or health yet. Okay. So again, probably you can dabble with that if you think that it makes a difference. Sometimes with supplements there's a lot of placebo effect. And then C is no evidence, but the media love C, so there'll be one study in there that they pick out and they say this is a new thing. And then D is banned. So it probably worked, but they're banned. So in general, when somebody, when an athlete would come to me with a whole array of supplements that they're taking, we would literally just look at them and kind of say, okay, listen, this is A, B, C, D, separate them out. I think you need to be taking these and these amounts, obviously making sure your diet is absolutely correct first, and you're hydrating, etc., And then if you want to take some B and C, up to you, as long as they're, again, back to the idea that they need to be, make sure that they're produced in factories where there's good manufacturing processes. So I think there was a story which was linked to a football team, something to do with Mexico, where the supplements they were contaminated with some sort of anabolic steroids, and then, they didn't pass the doping test because it was the supplements.
It's a tragedy, really,
exactly,
isn't it?
Absolutely. So I think in the UK we have Informed Sport, so that's the regulatory body that makes sure that the supplements are actually made in a way that's good and checked and clean.
The clinic I've been working at is attached to a gym down in Rains Park. See a lot of, I would say they're non-athletes, taking protein supplements. What's your view on protein supplementation, and where is it and where isn't it beneficial?
Again, there's so many protein supplements out there. So there's just your typical whey, or there might be a recovery supplement which has some protein and some carbohydrates. So with sports nutrition, there's no one way that fits all. And very similarly, what you do in one session is not what you do in every session. So there might be some sessions where you've had a high intensity session where you have, on a cellular level, damaged your muscles, that you might need to have some whey protein shake afterwards because it's fast absorbed protein. That's not to say everybody needs it after every single training session. So I think it's very individual, so it will be dependent on what their goals are, what the rest of their diet looks like. I think supplements are convenient, so having, being able to chuck some whey and put some water in, shake it up and drink it as you kind of leave the gym is probably more convenient than sitting there tucking into a chicken sandwich. But the studies have shown very much that actually whether you take a whey protein supplement, whether you eat food, same effect.
Okay.
And again, you could argue from the food you're getting more than just the protein. You're getting all the different antioxidants, things like that are also helped in muscle recovery. So I think you've got to do what suits you, but it's not that everybody needs to be on protein supplements. It depends on the context of the individual patient or client.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you about is energy drinks. And when I said to you the word energy drinks, I could see you like,
ooh, jittery.
Yeah, and I mean, I was recently in theatre with an ODP, and he keeps Monster energy drinks in theatre. He has, I shouldn't say in theatre, he keeps them just at the edge of theatre, but he has 4 of these large cans of Monster energy drinks, and he drinks it for the caffeine. And I was thinking about how many calories essentially he's consuming just in the drinks alone.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that they're a problem, these types of energy drinks?
A huge problem, and actually in terms of, I forgot my public health hat on, huge with adolescents. So they're the highest consumers of sugar-sweetened beverages, and particularly energy drinks. And just, terrible. We shouldn't, a medic having energy drink. So would not recommend them whatsoever. So, if you want the caffeine, the better way to do it would be have an espresso.
Absolutely.
But again, with caffeine, it's this thing of, recommended maximum dosage is 400 milligrams a day. We've all had all-nighters where we've needed to have lots of espressos the day after. And that's fine to do once in a while, but if that then becomes your way of living, in the long term, that's a problem, because caffeine squeezes your adrenal glands, and we know the adrenal glands produce all your stress hormones, and so if you're constantly, we live stressful lives anyway, we don't need anything else to be squeezing our adrenal glands. So if you're then constantly having lots of caffeine which squeezes your adrenal glands, one day there'll be nothing left to squeeze, and then we start talking about adrenal fatigue and things like that. Right. So I love coffee, I'm a coffee fan, and I look forward to my, one coffee every day, but I think we need to, in general with caffeine, if you're stumbling from one coffee to the next coffee to the next coffee throughout your day, you need to rethink about your coffee intake. But remember, caffeine is addictive, so if you go from 10 a day to 0 a day, you'll struggle. So it's kind of weaning yourself.
Okay. And just to sort of round up really, sports drinks are a different thing to energy drinks, I think. What do you recommend for perhaps people going to do the London Marathon? What should they be taking with them or drinking when they're actually training or running?
Sports drinks, interesting. So again, what they have is the carbohydrate that you need, and when you're doing a lot of sport, and electrolytes. So the key with people doing the London Marathon, considering it's in a couple of days, is that they stick to the strategy, the nutrition strategy that they've done. Don't try anything new. However, sports drinks, again, very similar to whey protein shakes and any sports shakes, is they can be used and they should be used, but only in very specific contexts. So, there's this new concept of training low. Have you heard about it? So it's this idea that actually we tend to rely a lot on sugar as a source of energy. So if you train your body to use more fat, so what you would do is you would go to bed, you would have dinner, go to bed, wake up, have some water, and then go do a session, a cycling session or a running session, fasted. So what you're doing there is you've got some glycogen on board, but it doesn't take very long for the glycogen to kind of be depleted, and then you're forcing your body to then start metabolizing fat. So then what happens is, overall, you become more efficient as using fat as an energy source, which is a good thing. However, if you did every single session on training low, your immune system would be suppressed. So, and your risk of overtraining would be much higher. So it's, again, really important that maybe some sessions are trained low, but some sessions, which are kind of high intensity, all about that performance, you need to have carbohydrates on board, because the studies have very clearly shown that actually, as soon as, I think the study was looking at cyclists, and they were training at their maximum, and literally the moment that they put a carbohydrate containing beverage into their mouth, and they showed that brain sensors, they showed that the reward sensors in their brain lit up. So, and then they literally worked that much harder. So it's probably to do with the fact that your muscles like fuel, but also the fact that your brain thinks, yes, fuel, work harder. So in terms of performance, we know carbohydrates during sport have an effect. So there is a time when you need to use sports drinks, but not every single time. And I think, again, it depends on your goal. If you want to lose weight, and you are you're going off for a spin session, and then you're taking in an energy drink or a sports drink, what you're doing there is you're just going to be using the carbohydrates from the sports drink rather than tapping into your fat.
Yeah.
So, all in context.
Yeah, all in context.
Yeah.
Right. Just because of the fact that it's in 2 days, I might as well ask you now, carb loading, should people be doing that? So?
Interesting. So again, the science has changed a lot. So when I was at university, it was very much around, shows my age now, so it's very much around depleting your carb stores by going and training, like crazy, and then spending a week or so repleting by eating a lot of carbohydrates. Now we know that actually you can carb load in about 2 or 3 days. And actually it's not about eating copious amounts of pasta. What it is about making smart carbohydrate choices. So yes, your portion size of carbohydrates will increase slightly from meal to meal. So for example, in general, your portion size of carbohydrate, if you look at a normal plate, should be half the plate vegetables, a quarter of the plate carbohydrate, good carbs, a quarter of the plate protein. So what you would do then is just change it from a quarter to maybe a half of the plate carbohydrate, and that's all you would be eating. And you would kind of have that at breakfast, lunch, and dinner type of thing. And if you don't want to necessarily increase the amount of carbohydrate at your main meals, then what you do is just have higher carbohydrate snacks. So rather than having an apple as a snack, you might actually have a handful of dried mango, because that will contain more carbohydrate, per 100 grams. And then actually in 2 days you can carb load. But again, it depends on what you're starting off with. So if somebody has got a really low carbohydrate diet normally, then they would probably need to up their carbohydrate intake a bit more, or maybe start 3 days before. Whereas if someone has already got quite a high carbohydrate diet and is eating already 5 or 6 grams per kilogram body weight, then they might not have to carbohydrate as much.
They might be repleting.
Exactly.
Already.
Yeah. So it's a moderation thing rather than this is an excuse to have the biggest plate of pasta I can ever have.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. It's been really, really fascinating.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Wish you all the best with what you've got planned in the future.
Thank you very much. Cool.